What's up, everybody? Welcome to SWAT MMA. We're smoking weed. We're talking mixed martial arts. This is episode 132. I'm Jarrod here with Paul.
What up?
Coming to you from the fight capital of the world, sunny Las Vegas. Today, former WWE superstar and current BKFC fighter Captain Jack Claffey is joining the show to discuss his upcoming BKFC debut. Plus, we'll be touching on the Fury White ramifications, including a possible bout with UFC champion Francis Ngannou. We'll be discussing the Bellator results, where friend of the show Blake Perry notched his first victory, and we'll be discussing the Liz Carmouche Velasquez controversy, the upcoming BKFC 24 card, as well as the UFC. But before we get to the combat sports, y'all know what time it is. Grab your weed, fire it up, and let's dive into the weed of the week.
Smoke weed every day.
We got a few different new strains joining the show this week, don't we, Paul?
Yep. Mix and match deal.
Yes, sir.
Got us a whole bunch of different ones.
Got a few different things we're smoking out of. We got some joints. We got the bubbler. We got the PAX 3 loaded with weed this time instead of a concentrate. I actually prefer that for cannabis. That's why I bought it. It was not for concentrates, but
Yeah, I
to
remember.
vape weed out of.
It takes a lot of the harshness away for sure.
It really does.
Yeah.
And, you know, one thing that's kind of cool is you can actually reuse the vaped weed, like not smoke it, but
Yeah.
you can cook with it.
Oh, really?
And since it's been decarbonized by the vaporizer already, you can literally grind it up and just sprinkle it over something you're eating.
Mhm.
And it doesn't taste like weed. Being in the vaporizer kind of takes that flavor out of it. So
Yeah.
it just kind of has like a kind of a nutty flavor
Yeah,
to it. If
earthy
you add it to the right
taste.
stuff,
Mhm.
you can't even notice it. And like as little as a gram will fade you for a day.
Really?
It's surprising. Yeah.
That's intense.
But we got some cherry cheesecake today. And we got a classic. We got some AK-47. You know, that AK-47 we'll touch on real quick. That came out in 1992. So that's been out for quite a while. It's a sativa. And it's a cross of Colombian, Mexican, Thai, and Afghani landrace strains.
Mm-hmm.
And long ago, one of my favorite weeds, like, it was one of the first things that my friends in Colorado were growing was AK-47 back in the day. And then the cherry cheesecake, some pretty good genetics. We got Kimbo Kush crossed with cherry pie. Cherry pie, legendary strain as well. It's Granddaddy Perps crossed with Durban Poison. And that, like, pretty much, Paul, when we come across any strain in a dispensary or anywhere else that has the name cherry in it,
Yeah.
that's why. It's because it's got cherry pie genetics somewhere close.
Mm-hmm.
Kimbo Kush is a little fruity too. It's Blackberry Kush crossed with Starfighter. So all in all, that kind of lends itself to the fruity smell. I don't really taste weed like a lot of people do, but I can definitely pick up the smell of the sweetness on the cherry cheesecake.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on this joint here we're smoking? Because that's what this one is.
I mean, I feel like it's pretty smooth. I mean, that was like the first time I've coughed through the whole time we've been smoking this joint. So
Yeah, it's nice.
and you know me, I'm a cougher.
Yeah, so am I, actually. Anybody who listens to this show can usually hear that in the background at some point. Speaking of which.
Speak of the devil.
Right.
But yeah.
We got the AK in the packs and in the bubbler here, so we'll hit that later on in the show.
Cherry cheesecake has some pretty cool terpenes in it as well. It's got
What's
some
in there?
limonene, carotene, you know, all the shit I can't pronounce.
The beta carotene is a good one. It's like a peppery type of terpene, and the limonene is a citrusy one. So that's where it gets a lot of that citrusy smell from. That, you know, is described as cherry, but it is what it is.
There's another one on there, but I've never seen it before.
Let me see this.
Humulene.
Oh, humulene, yeah, that's a rare one. That's a good one. Yeah, you pronounce that right. Well, you don't see that in a lot of weeds. What I like about this strain is it doesn't have myrcene as one of the top ones. And just a little tip to people that are listening, if you're looking for weed that won't make you tired and you live in a legal state where you get your terpene profile, avoid the myrcene because that's the terpene in cannabis that gives you that sleepy feeling.
This shit's gonna take us down, man.
Right?
This other weed we have is the number one thing it has is myrcene.
All right, well, we got this joint fired up. We're ready to get started. We've got a special guest joining us today. Joining us today is former WWE superstar and now pro bare knuckle boxer who is making his debut for BKFC at their BKFC 25 event on May 6th, Captain Jack Claffy. Jack, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, guys. I'm happy to be here.
Well, listen, let's dive right into it. All right. Everybody knows your pro wrestling background, but not nearly as many people are aware of the fact that you actually have an MMA history as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I actually have like a history going with martial arts, like quite back into my life. I've been thinking about it as I've been getting older, and I think Dragon Ball Z was probably to blame. Dragon Ball Z and Bruce Lee are probably big influences. So like when I was a kid, I actually did Taekwondo for years and years and years. So I had like a traditional martial arts sort of background. I took a break to actually pursue professional wrestling because at the time I couldn't train, both things because I started training wrestling when I was like 15. So I was very young when I started with professional wrestling. And then eventually I started incorporating jiu-jitsu and Capt wrestling and judo into my professional wrestling training until I had found out I was an amateur MMA fighter before I'd realized it. And it was one of those interesting. I'm not sure how I ended up here, but once I was competing in MMA and competing in combat sports, I realized that this is the other thing I was kind of probably supposed to be doing with myself.
And so, with that being said, what went into like making that decision between like bare knuckle fighting and instead of maybe going into another combat sport, whether it be like you were saying Taekwondo or boxing or any of the other combat sports?
Honestly, really simply, it was just because this was offered to me. I thought about doing bare knuckle boxing in the past as almost this throwaway. Oh, and I'd like to do this at some point before I've stopped competing, like kind of tick a few things off the bucket list because I'd done amateur wrestling and jiu-jitsu tournaments, like I said, and judo and amateur MMA. And then I was thinking, I'll do Muay Thai. And then I thought, Lethway, the bare knuckle kickboxing, that'll be fun. That would be fun to do maybe one of them. And bare knuckle boxing was just always on the list. And I was approached by now my management company, Bare Knuckle Management, and they basically said, we have potentially an opportunity for you to box bare knuckle if you'd be interested in it. And my coaches were interested in training with it, and that's really how we ended up here.
With that history that you were just talking about, starting, when you were younger with Taekwondo and then progressing through a lot of different disciplines along the way, there's a big difference between doing martial arts, to train and to better yourself and to maybe compete within that little circle of like Taekwondo and tournaments and all that. There's a big difference between that and then making the decision to actually become a professional fighter. Was there something in your life that led you towards fighting professionally, or was it more of something that you just decided to do professionally, actually fight people later on?
I think it was, it's something that I think is like a necessity for like my growth as like someone who views themselves somewhat as a martial artist. So I don't know if that comes across as really, really pretentious from someone who doesn't have any professional fights. But yeah, I view myself like partially as, a martial artist. And part of that is, I think, the ability to coach people. So I would want to, coach people moving forward or as a retirement plan or whatever. And having as much experience is going to be part of that. But I'd feel fraudulent training people if I hadn't had the experience of being competitive. Even if it hadn't been at a professional level, even if I'd only ever competed at an amateur level, I would have felt fraudulent to have ever taught other people without having that real world practice of it, because it's all theory until a bell rings. It's all good practice. Like, everyone looks like a black belt on the heavy bag.
Exactly. And with that being said, going into these professional bouts, I feel like, do you feel like you have a step up against your opponents because you've been in front of these large crowds and in front of, being able to work the crowd and, be on the microphone in front of the WWE audience, and now you're headed into the BKFC audience, you're not really gonna feel that same pressure that maybe some of the other guys will?
Oh, I definitely deal less with the, I don't say I don't deal with anxiety. Like, there's always going to be a certain pressure to perform, right? Because, you know, you want to do well, you want to win fundamentally. So there's always a pressure there. But yeah, absolutely. I don't feel an anxiety being in front of a crowd. Like I said, I've been being a professional wrestler. I've actually been in front of a live crowd since I was 16. So for the last 16 years, I've been dealing with big crowds of people, small crowds of people, very large crowds of people, and it doesn't affect me in that way. So yeah, it's another string to the bow, as I would say. But obviously, I'm coming from a place where I have a lot of other experience, but I don't have a lot of direct experience with bare knuckle. So I'm very interested to learn where I need to sort of make up the time, as it were, as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're fighting Brandon Lambert in your debut on May 6th, who some call like the bad boy of BKFC. What is your overall assessment of him, his style, and how you feel you match up?
I'm in a advantaged position because obviously I've seen myself box, but Brandon's never seen me box. I've seen Brandon box, and you know, he talks a lot. I'll just say he talks a lot.
Indeed.
And I didn't think very much of him. And then I saw him box, and then I thought less of him.
Well, that about sums it up. As a fighter, I'm actually not very familiar with him. We watch a lot of sports. We did see some interviews with him. You know, he came rushing up to you in the little loudmouth confrontation thing. He just seems like the loudmouth bully persona is going on pretty strong with him. And I heard you say that you were getting a lot of like requests from BKFC fans to perhaps silence this guy finally.
Yeah, I didn't really have any sort of personal grudge against Brandon. You know, it's like someone shouting at me on the internet is water off a duck's back. You know, at this point in my life, so I wasn't bothered about him. I thought he was kind of amusing. You know, he's got a funny look. Okay, whatever. But yeah, I got requests. I got message requests. I got direct messages from other BKFC fighters, a few fans, basically begging me to fight him because he had promised, he had sworn to the gods above that if he couldn't defeat me in a contest, he would retire from bare knuckle and be gone forever. He was willing to do loser leaves home kind of, you know, sort of match at this point. And I'm no skin off my back, whatever, mate. But all of these other people were like, you have to get rid of him. Yeah, absolutely. You have the opportunity. We have knighted you for this singular opportunity to rid us of Brandon Lambert. I liked the phrase, you need to remove this armpit stain from our sport, which is the one that kind of stuck with me. I quite liked that one.
That is nice. Armpit stain of the sport. That's a very graphic depiction there indeed.
I was reading something recently that you do in your training that I found really interesting. They were saying that you use this karate instrument to harden your hands. Explain that a little bit to our listeners.
Sure. It's called a makiwara, and I'm sure my northern English accent is saying that perfectly. You know, I'm fluent in Japanese. Yeah, it's a makiwara board. You'll see a lot of karate fighters use it in very traditional dojos. Basically, it's a freestanding board that has a certain amount of give to it. So you're not trying to punch it exactly in the manner that you would punch it, you know, if you were punching another human being, for example. You know, you're doing a certain type of recoil when you're punching someone. So you're punching in a specific way. The term I've heard, I think Stephen Thompson's dad actually was the first one I'd heard describe it. He called it a dead stop punch. So it's not trying to punch and rebound like you would on a bag or, you know, with mitts or anything. It's punching and driving into the board, and the board will kind of has a give, and it's that push back that your fist is absorbing, is the way it's been explained to me, and it's supposed to harden your knuckles up. So you see all the old karate fighters with like really thick knuckles. To the design, the idea, their philosophy was if we could hit you once, it would be over. I don't think I'm going to develop like the iron fist in time for May. But it has actually, it never shows up really well, but just above my
Yeah, you can
wrist.
see it.
You can kind of see it.
that. Yeah, I can see that bump there. Yeah, looks like an
So I
extra
told him
knuckle.
a physical. Oh yeah, I've got a fifth knuckle now in my hand. Apparently the bones, the free floating bones in my wrists are calcifying from a lot of the bare knuckle training I've been doing. So I'm gaining extra sort of knuckles on my hand, and they're not inflamed, they're not painful. I just have some reinforced hands on me right now, which is quite an interesting development.
So with that being said, and you going through that like training method, how would you explain your style to maybe our fans who are just getting ready to see you step in the BKFC kid or ring?
I'm not sure actually. I think I have a really good idea of what it's going to be, but once I'm actually under the lights and once I've got that other body giving me the actual truly aggressive energy, because you know, as good as the sparring rounds as I'm getting are, they're still just sparring rounds. Like I know if I do get touched or you know I start getting hurt to the body, that the person's not going to try and potentially take my head off and leave me out for the week. But I have jokingly been referring to it as karate boxing for a little bit actually, but for the simple fact that I felt that was, if you looked at Cuban and particularly Soviet style footwork from amateur boxing, there's a resemblance in terms of some of the bouncing and feint steps that they use to karate fighters. So I thought that was interesting, and along with actual traditional classical boxing techniques, because you know it's a different sport to gloved boxing, but it's so fundamentally similar that I think if you're not trying to learn boxing, you're on a fool's errand. So it's trying to create a combination of, you know, good foot movement to where I can close distance because I see a lot of shifting punches. I see a lot of MMA style footwork, but I think a lot more blocking patterns based on more sort of classical boxing. So I'm calling it karate boxing because it kind of gives me chuckles, and Captain Jack's School of Karate Boxing might be a t-shirt one day I can sell to people, but that's kind of about it. Yeah, it's a bit of karate boxing, and then we've got I still have my clinch on me. I've done MMA and Muay Thai enough to know that if worse comes to worse, I can grab this person by a collar tie and probably ragdoll him for 10 minutes.
Well, you may be lacking in the professional, record or experience, but I can just tell, being a former amateur boxer, he's a former amateur wrestler, I can tell on what you're saying. You're taking this very seriously. You're talking serious stuff here. And without a doubt, you're putting in a lot of hard work. Let's go ahead and switch things up in this interview a little bit, though, Jack. I've heard you mention in other interviews that you happen to have a fondness for pipe smoking. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about that?
I do have a fondness for pipe smoking. I think
Is there a particular tobacco you like, or a style of pipe, or?
I'm not a big tobacco smoker, I will say, but I'm a big pipe smoker.
See, we're pipe smokers in that regard as well, of course.
Yeah, I've been informed that you chaps are the pipe smokers, and you're based in Las Vegas, which is a wonderful place to holiday to.
Yes.
I'm absolutely assured.
Yeah, it gives us, our acronym, the SWAT stands for smoking weed and talking. So, yes, we were wondering if you were leaning, tobacco pipe, or if you were smoking God's good green herb out of some of those pipes.
I would say if you ever check my corncob pipe, which, yes, I do have a corncob pipe when I'm on a boat, you'd be probably closer to God's good green than the tobacco chew in there, actually. And the problem is, and I will say this, I know that you chaps like to have a smoke on there. It is a little bit late where I am, so if you want me to pass out live on the podcast, absolutely can do. But I will refrain for the rest of the day, and we can have a social smoke, I'm sure, at some point in the future.
Yeah, perhaps in the future when you don't have a fight coming up around the corner, then you can come back on. We can do that. Another thing I wanted to ask you about, I've noticed on Instagram that you have a dog, and your dog has a very interesting name. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your dog and his name? And I believe he had a birthday earlier this year, correct?
He did. I have two dogs, but I assume you're referring to Bilbo Waggins, who is my little hound mix of a dog. Yeah, we went on a lovely little walk today, actually.
Bilbo Waggins.
Bilbo Waggins. He is. We also thought he suited the name Mickey because he's got a very mouse-like face, and we got him when we were in Orlando as well. So. I'm happy for Bilbo Waggins. I like Bilbo Waggins. My other dog is she's a half bulldog, half golden retriever. So she's a very funny little mix of a thing. But she's got black and white, so we call her Guinness. And she is a bit of a terror, but I do love her.
Well, they sound awesome.
Well, another thing we did notice with you is, which a lot of fighters are starting to do, is you are sponsored by a CBD company. Is that something that you use for recovery? Is that something you use in your every day-to-day life as far as like CBD and CBD products?
Oh, absolutely. You know, different laws regarding THC in England right now is different from where you guys are. But no, CBD is definitely one of the supplements I always include. You know, I've gotten Pure Dose CBD are the sponsors who they send me a lot of supplements to keep me like topped up. They do some really good gummies. But I've been mostly using the oil. So in my morning coffee, I always use CBD oil. And there's a really good muscle rub actually that Pure Dose use. So I've been using that a lot. I've actually been using that a little bit on my hands as well, particularly like, you know, with a long, even when I'm wearing gloves, you know, like long bag sessions, you can just wear away at your hands quite a bit. So any sort of like inflammation with the CBD rub, I feel like I have a noticeable difference after applying it after, you know, like 10, 15 minutes. So absolutely, I'd heartily recommend. You know, I try not to actually recommend anything unless I use it myself.
For sure, that's definitely true with the inflammation. I've used it for similar items, just, you know, sore knees, other things, muscles, and I found CBD to be real helpful too. It's cool seeing that at least a part of the cannabis plant that can be extracted now, you know, with the science methods that we have, that can be pretty much worldwide, that everybody can benefit from without being worried about the legality issues in various states and countries. Have they been your sponsor for long?
Yeah, basically they kind of reached out just as we were kind of putting this bare knuckle stuff together. Honestly, I knew I was going to be competing, and they'd only reached out to sort of like supply product at the time, and I said, hey, I've got a I've got potentially a project coming up if you guys wanted to get your name on the shorts and get your name out there, because it's a relatively new company in the UK as well. I'll give them another shout out, so I make sure I doubly get their name, Pure Dose CBD. They've been excellent to me, and they keep the cola gummies are good as well. I have to lay off the sugar for the next few weeks, but the cola gummies are waiting for me when I get back.
Well, that's great. That's awesome to hear. Why don't you tell our listeners if you have some other sponsors you'd like to mention, and then also where they can find you on social media?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I do wear gloves, as I mentioned, and when I'm wearing gloves, I tend to wear Rumble Bros gloves. It's a company based out in California, I believe. So check them out. They've always kept me nice and well protected. I've also got Alpha Black Label, who will be doing my walkout shorts and t-shirt. If you check them out, they've got a Captain Jack basketball jersey that they're currently selling as well. If you spend over £300, you'll get free shipping to the UK. So if there are UK people trying to get the shirt shipped over, just sort of gang together and, you know, do a group order and you'll be good. Aside from that, aside from all the plugs and all the money and all the annoying sponsorship things that I have to mention because people are so nice to me, I can be found at Instagram at Mr. Gentleman Jack. And I want you to keep an eye out for CPR, which is Canal Pirate Radio, which is going to be a little project that myself and my darling wife, Clara Sinclair, are currently working on. So keep an eye out for that as well.
Well, that's great. We will. Awesome. Thank you so much. Everybody who is listening, please tune in. It's BKFC 25 coming from Orlando, Florida on May 6th. It's going to be a featherweight bout. That's Captain Jack Claffey versus Brandon Lambert. You can find it on the BKTV app or at bareknuckle.tv. Thank you so much for joining us, Jack, and good luck on May 6th.
Thank you very much for having me, guys. I enjoyed it.
You bet. Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, we just want to thank Jack again for coming on the show.
Looking forward to that debut. But you know what? That's 2 weeks from now. This week, we do have BKFC 24 with a pretty exciting title fight at the top, though, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we got Lorenzo Hunt taking on Joe Riggs. A real interesting matchup, I do think, because both these guys have a similar opponent in Hector Lombard. And both of them had, obviously, in Hunt's case, he was able to get the victory and the championship. But in Riggs' case, it was very strange situation that which led to the end of that fight.
It was controversial. I felt that the stoppage shouldn't have happened personally, and I think that the BKFC likely agrees because look where he's fighting right now. He's
Yeah.
right back in a title fight in his next bout, and I think that's their way of kind of making it up to him.
Yeah.
I would assume. I mean, it seems logical, right?
Yeah.
Joe Riggs is really tough, man. Both these guys are good, though. Lorenzo Hunt surprised me when he beat Hector Lombard. I really thought he was going to get tooled up there. You know, he gets away with the victory in a convincing way, and his BKFC record at this point is undeniable. He's 6-1-1, and for BKFC and where they're at in their promotion, that's about
Having
as good
8
as
fights
you
is
can
a
get.
lot. Yeah.
I mean, Riggs has a good BKFC. He's 3-1-1, and that's a lot of experience. He's got 5 fights. He's only lost 1.
Yeah.
BKFC is a brand new thing. So these records might seem insignificant, but they're not at this point. These are impressive win records for where we're at.
Yeah.
And I find this fight very intriguing. This is for the light heavyweight championship, but in BKFC, that's 185 pounds. So.
Yeah. I don't know. I think Hunt probably takes this.
See, I'm leaning towards Joe Riggs. I just like his overall fighting experience is undeniable.
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
he has been there and done that, and I think he was tooling up Lombard before that situation with the referee and the glove or the shorts and etc.
Yeah.
I like him to get out a victory here. I don't think it's going to be a stoppage, but I like Riggs with a decision victory.
I can respect it.
The rest of the card looks exciting. It's a little bit too many fights for us to touch on, but I'm going to say it again, and I always say it, and they're not a sponsor of this show, but BK TV app is $5 a month.
Yeah.
You get the pay-per-views. Plus, you get their library of fights, which include all of their old events. They have a show kind of like the Ultimate Fighter, Contender Series style. It's, in my opinion, literally it's the best $5 you can spend on combat sports in a month, for goodness sakes.
Oh, yeah. Full fight library, everything like that.
Yeah, so I would encourage everybody to check that out. BKFC events are great. And we'll be talking next week a little bit more in depth about Captain Jack's fight and the rest of that card as well. BKFC's putting out a lot of exciting things. And thus far, I mean, Paul, I know we were both a little nervous, right, with the Triller thing.
But so far, so good.
They're not interfering.
Yeah.
And
We'll see.
We'll see, man.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Bellator, though. But let's start off with, we had Blake Perry on a couple weeks ago to discuss his debut at this card here this past weekend against Cooper in Hawaii. And what happened, Paul?
It was actually a really good fight. There was he faced a little adversity early, but ultimately in the second round he was, switched to multiple different submissions within the finish, and then ends up, I think it was the Dars that he got at the end.
Yeah, he gutted out, bottom position for a while in that second round. Cooper was definitely winning that round.
Yep.
Up to that point, and he just showed an amazing heart. He stayed in the fight.
Yep.
He got bloodied up. He kept working it, and he gets the reversal and a really slick submission to notch that all-important victory, which should lead to hopefully an exciting fight for him in Bellator in the future. So, but having him on before the fight, I was really interested in how he would do, and it was great to see him just get a slick victory.
Absolutely.
He has some Hawaiian roots, as he told us on the show as well, so it's kind of a home crowd sort of for him as well, in a way. And what a debut! What a way to open up the card.
Yep. And your pro career as well.
Absolutely, that was excellent. Now, a lot happened on the Bellator. I mean, we had back-to-back fights.
Yeah.
And due to time constraints, we can't touch on everything. But we saw some underdogs pull some upsets in this Grand Prix.
Pachi Mix upsets Horiguchi, which was mind-blowing.
mind blowing for sure, my friend. I
Yeah.
was shocked by that. That was, I mean, we both clearly picked Horiguchi
Yeah.
to win this tournament.
I thought it was his tournament to lose for sure,
Mhm.
without a doubt. And then the interim championship gets taken away. S.W.A.T ends up KOing Juan Archuleta, which is another one that nobody saw coming. That's
What a performance!
yeah, yeah. And those two guys, like that just shows they're dangerous.
It is, and we
They are
did touch
dangerous.
on it, you know, last week talking about this tournament, how
Yep.
alternates can come in, a la Daniel Cormier,
Yep.
and seize these opportunities and shock everybody, and look what happens. I
And
mean,
not only the alternates as well. It's also like a big part of it is like these guys who maybe are lower ranked guys that are fighting the like
right, like Patchy Mix, right?
like Patchy Mix and
Mhm.
Stotts too, because
Stotts,
you
yeah.
know fucking they made Juan Archuleta the interim champion because Pettis is not able to fight in the tournament. So
Mhm.
basically being the de facto number one seed because he was number one ranked in the division. So for him to upset basically the champ and the number one seed in the first round is gonna make this whole thing a lot more interesting than people realize.
Before we get into more serious topics, I can't help but wonder, do you think that Juan Archuleta will forever be announced as the former interim champion for a belt that he was gifted and then lost immediately when
He
it
was
first
the
came up?
champion though.
Was
when,
he?
When I think he did.
Oh, he was a Bellator champion prior to that, huh? So they
So,
probably won't
'cause then
mention
Pettis
the
took it from
interim.
him.
Yeah, that's right.
Unless that was when the I'm not sure. Title could have been vacant at that
Because I know
point.
UFC loves to tout this former interim title holder stuff.
No, it's true.
And they hand them out like candy, so you hear it a lot.
I would hate that.
Wouldn't that be weird? A weird
Oh,
situation.
Yeah,
Like,
very
like, here
weird
it is.
situation. Here's the former interim
And it
bantamweight
was like
champ.
a
Ugh,
so.
sounds nasty. I don't like that.
But you're right. He was a former title holder. That slipped
Yeah.
my mind. So yeah, they'll just announce him as a former champ.
But yeah, it's interesting because really this whole tournament now becomes a battle to see who's the real number one contender.
Yeah, this opens things. This
Completely.
changes the whole game.
Yeah.
With these Archuleta and Horiguchi losing in these manner. It God, I love. That's why we love a tournament, right?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing too with Pettis is like those two had lost to Pettis, and that was their chance to get back to like that fight. And with both them losing, that kind of not closes the door, but it damn sure makes it a little harder to get in line for who's next. For
Yeah, it
Sergio.
changes the whole landscape of
Yeah.
not only the tournament but the division as well.
After the
Yeah.
tournament. Yeah, most definitely. Well, let's. There was also some. Although there were some good upsets, there was some serious controversy in the Liz Carmouche Velasquez fight, which was
Yes.
really bad in my opinion.
Before we hit the controversy, we wind up with a new champion.
Yeah.
Velasquez loses for the first time and her title in the process by stoppage, crucifix position by Carmouche in round 4.
Yeah.
Mike Beltran is the referee. But the controversy doesn't come with. Everybody agrees she was in the crucifix. What's the controversy here? It's the stoppage.
Yeah, the stoppage was
The
bad.
speed of the stoppage.
The speed of the stoppage and just the manner in which it was handled. Because like, I'm gonna take this a little bit deeper than just the stoppage for a second. You have to view the fight as a whole when you're talking about stopping it as quick as he stopped it. You know what I'm saying? So like, just to try to give him even the slightest justification here, there would just have to be so much. There just would have to be so much more of like a war going on in there for them to have like deemed that as like too much. She took too much damage. Better stop the fight. But if you look at it, it's actually on the other side. There was never a time where Carmouche had dropped Velasquez. Velasquez dropped Carmouche twice, and then literally going into the fourth, she ends up getting a takedown in the crucifix position. I understand that's a dominant position, all that good stuff, but you're also like, you only let her land 4, 5, 6 elbows, 0 blood, 0 like there was like, I'd understand if like, you know, she hit her with a couple elbows and like things were
Like
getting
she opened her
real
up real
messy.
bad.
Yeah, like
See, that's where it comes in. It's not. And I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here just for the sake of conversation.
Mhm.
I think what I'm going to guess might be going on in Beltran's head is there's 3 minutes or roughly left in this round.
Yeah, it's like 2.5, 3 minutes.
And you're not getting out of a crucifix. I mean, look at Kimbo Slice,
Yeah.
Roy Jones. I mean, you're just going to take a lot of punishment, so he just stops it before more punishment is ensued. I'm guessing. Playing devil's advocate. Would she have gotten out of there, or would she have just gotten crushed for the next 2.5 minutes?
Yeah, no, I understand that, but at the same time, I'd understand. There just would have to be another like. It doesn't even necessarily would have to be damaged. So I would just need to have to see some fatigue, in which I would also think like, oh, there's no way she's getting out of there. You know what I mean?
Here's
like,
a controversial question for you. I'm just curious. If it was 2 male flyweights in the exact same scenario with the exact same time, does Beltran stop the fight after 4 or 5 blows in a crucifix, or does he let it go longer? Does he act the same way?
I'm not quite sure.
I think that it's an interesting
Yeah,
scenario.
no,
I don't
it's
know
true.
either, but
Yeah, I'm not.
and I'm not
sure,
trying
to be honest.
negatively throw shade on him. I'm just saying I've seen it in this sport before where it seems it gets the
Yeah.
impression where sometimes male fighters are allowed to take more punishment in a way than female fighters are at certain times, not as a
Yeah.
universal rule or anything. I mean, look
Yeah,
at
I
how
get what you're saying.
Shevchenko punished that Priscilla.
Yeah.
I can't remember her last name, but Shevchenko just punished that girl when she
Yeah.
first moved down the flyweight.
Mhm.
So I don't mean it as a universal. I'm just saying from time to time, this seems to be a thing, and I've heard other female fighters mention this and that they're getting stopped too soon. And I don't know if that's a case of this, but I can't help but wonder.
Yeah.
That's all.
No,
I'm
it's a good
saying,
question at the end of the
you
day.
know.
I mean,
Because I agree it was too soon, but I also think that it would have been stopped in another 30 seconds if you wanted it. You know,
yeah. Well, that's the thing.
Liz
is
should have definitely rained more blows
yeah,
down.
give
Those are
her
some
the
pussy
30
ass.
seconds.
I don't mean that in the negative because they're women. Those are some weak ass blows.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. They
She
weren't
rained
like,
down,
and that's the
too.
thing. If they were just like clean shots where she was bouncing her head up and down off the canvas and stuff like that would be one thing. But that too was like there was struggle from the bottom. It wasn't like she had her completely flattened out. She was just going fucking.
Dude, it was like the
Ape shit
Kimbo
on her.
Slice Roy Nelson, because Roy Nelson
Yeah.
was throwing pussy ass blows on Kimbo
Yeah.
too, but it was just after a minute, it was like he landed like 50 of them, and it was like,
Yeah.
okay.
Well,
I
even
mean,
in that case, like
those are
let
some
him
weak
let
ass
her land
punches,
let her
but
land like 10. Like
Yeah.
don't let her land 4 and
we
call
wouldn't be
it.
having this conversation
Yeah.
and we'd be talking about Liz. Because you know who this is not fair to? Obviously, it's not fair to Velasquez. There's an argument for that, but it's definitely not fair to Liz Carmouche.
Yeah, that's
Because she didn't call for the fight to be
Yeah.
stopped. She didn't stop and look at the ref and go, huh? She didn't get up and walk away.
Yeah.
She was doing her thing, and the ref went in and stopped her.
True.
And she had just gotten a very important position on a fight that she was, depending on your opinion, definitely losing. By how much seems to be by debate. Some people say every round. Some people think it was close.
Yeah.
Either way,
Either
everybody
way,
agrees
yeah.
she was losing
Mhm.
prior to that point. So instead of this being a crowning moment for her, it's mired in controversy that
Yeah.
she had literally nothing to do with.
Nothing to do with yeah.
That now is outshining what she managed to accomplish, unfortunately for her.
Yeah, and that truly is unfortunate because that's kind of been her MO her whole career is being able to take advantage of that position. And I do truly wish that they gave her the chance to show her, her stuff because I do agree with you. Like it is a ultimately compromising position what she had her in, but
It doesn't get much more worse if it's
Yeah.
not a where you can get a sub. I mean,
Yeah.
but when it comes to a dominant position of strikes, I mean, the crucifix is
Well, you
I mean,
have nothing to
shit.
guard your face,
right.
You know what I mean?
Your arms are tied up.
Yeah,
And Liz is very strong. She's very tough on the ground. I mean,
Mhm.
her strength comes in wrestling.
yeah,
I imagine this is a tough thing for someone to get out from underneath her, no matter how good Velasquez is. So
Yeah,
it's
no
just
doubt.
unfortunate all the way.
yeah.
I thought Patricio Pitbull's response, I get his point of view when he's calling for, like, he should be held accountable.
Do you think his is a little bit?
I don't think
more-
it's that egregious.
Yeah, I think his is a lot more justified than theirs. Let's just be
Yeah.
honest here. Like,
So,
yeah, that's two different things. But
Look, Beltran in my mind has been a good referee every time I've seen him. I don't watch everything he does. Maybe I'm
Yeah.
totally wrong. I mean,
this
maybe
one he
there's
got wrong,
stats to
but you
prove
can't
my
get them all
opinion
right.
wrong.
You know, there's been times where people get him wrong, and there's been times where people, you know, don't handle it the right way at all in the other side. You know,
I'd rather see a referee make an error in the favor of a fighter's fucking safety than
Yeah.
an error where
you'd
you let
rather
somebody
see
just
early
get their
stoppage than
fucking
a late
shit
stoppage.
beat out of them
Yeah.
way too long,
Oh,
and they're permanently hurt. I mean, if McFarlane, I don't know, I was thinking about Julian Kish's fight. If Velasquez is as good as we all think she is, then
Yeah.
if she doesn't get an immediate rematch, then she'll
get
there
back to the
again
belt. Yeah,
and get the title back.
yeah.
You
Can't take back what's
you can't take back those blows, though. Maybe not in this case; they would have landed. But when
Yeah.
referees do let these fights go too far,
Mm-hmm.
and we talk about how corners don't stop it and nobody stops it, and these people just get beat down, you can't take that back. You
Yeah.
can't earn your brain cells back. You can't earn back any potential damage that's been done. You can earn back the title.
That's true.
And I know that doesn't
That's a
make
good
her
point.
feel any better, but
Yeah,
in the
but
big
that's just
picture,
the reality of it. Yeah,
if you're gonna fuck up, this is in my mind a better fuck up.
yeah, true.
So
That's a good point.
and real quick to finish out Bellator, we did see Cyborg get a decision victory
Yeah,
instead of a knockout, but it was a pretty dominant decision victory.
she whooped her.
She's now talking about she wants to box.
We'll see.
You know, Scott Coker's open to that type of shit, so she might actually get to do it.
But isn't Clarissa like one of her friends?
Yeah, I don't know who
I
she'd
don't know.
go. Again, it's boxing ain't what y'all think it is.
Yeah.
By y'all, I mean just the MMA champions who are like,
Yeah.
I can go do this. We're going to touch on that topic definitely later on in the show when we discuss Fury, White, and Ngannou, but we'll get there. So, a pretty good weekend though of Bellator fights, right?
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's switch over to the UFC for a bit. Let's talk about this upcoming fight this weekend. We have Rob Font taking on Marlon Chito Vera. It's a pretty big matchup in the bantamweight division, which is kind of starting to shape out now that we have a clear champion in Aljamain Sterling. So now we're gonna have to see who the real contenders are now, and I feel like this is it's a big fight for these two guys.
This is a big fight for these two guys. It's the only fight we're going to talk about on this card. Card's kind of weak. This fight's very good.
Yeah,
And this is Chito Vera's chance again here
crack
to
the upper
crack
echelon.
the upper echelon and make his case as a guy who is an impressive fighter who's been around a long time and just hasn't broken through yet. And he gets it here. But the problem is he's coming against Rob Font, who in my mind is already an established top tier talent.
Yeah.
And a little too much for him. I just don't see it. I mean, Vera's real scrappy and he's good and I like him, but I've been a believer in Rob Font as championship material for a little while here, and I think he's going to get a victory.
Well, both these guys really need this victory because you got Font who's coming off the loss to Aldo, and then you got Vera who's trying to crack into the upper echelon like in that way. This is like a win, like a must win for both guys.
I think Font. I think that loss to Aldo is going to result in Font getting better.
You think so?
I think so. And maybe he'll prove me wrong. Fuck do I know?
Yeah.
But that's my opinion of him, is that he's going to come out of that as a better fighter, and this is going to be where he shows it here against what's going to be a very game Chito Vera.
Yeah, most definitely. That's one thing about Chito Vera. No matter how the fight goes, you know that at any moment he's still in it. Like, you know what I mean? He's one of those guys that he's nose to the grind. Freaking, he doesn't care. You know, he'll grind out the fight, no matter if he's down 2 rounds, 3 rounds, because it's a 5-round fight. So anything can happen. You know what I mean? This could be a very, very, very interesting fight, in my opinion.
There's a problem for the winner of this fight, though, that has now resurfaced in a different way, and I think it's legit. Is we have Henry Cejudo, who we talked about prior as re-entering the USA DA testing pool, but he was talking a lot of shit on Volkanovski, and he suddenly changed his tune, and I think Dana has convinced him it's not happening, and he has shifted it back to the bantamweight division and to Aljamain Sterling.
Yeah.
And being as he left holding the belts that he left holding, there's a chance that he might walk his way right into an immediate title shot at bantamweight.
Technically, he'd be the lineal champion.
This is what I'm saying. He is the lineal champion.
Okay, now
And this really makes the division pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Because we've talked in the past about Dillashaw waiting in the wings. We've talked about, we've got fucking...
Even Aldo. Aldo literally
Aldo.
Is... If you take...
We've got all these things at play at bantamweight now. Cejudo is just a firecracker in the mix.
Yeah.
And I don't think that he wants a contender bout prior.
No.
I think that whatever deal he works out with Dana White will be, sure, I'll stop talking about Volkanovski, but you're going to give me a shot right into where I left holding the belt.
Pay me, motherfucker.
And I think that might happen. It's the UFC. They don't give a fuck about merit.
No. Well, I mean, there's still merit
it's
to it,
interesting.
though.
But yeah, that's the thing. There is
There
still
is
merit.
to
I'm
it,
not,
like
and I'm not
that-
saying there
yeah.
isn't, but I'm saying they're shown in the past when there isn't merit, they'll still give somebody a title shot.
In this case, we actually have a lineal champion, like returning to the division
Right.
after retirement. And
Is he
wanting
the
his
lineal
belt.
or is Dillashaw? I get mixed up. I pay much more attention to that in boxing. I mean, UFC
No,
is a
because
little bit.
I guess because Dillashaw and him fought for the flyweight belt.
That was the flyweight title on the line.
They're double lineal champions.
If it happens, I'm sure
Yes.
I'll
They're
get the scoop
co-lineals.
on all that. But
No, but yeah, it is a strange mix that you now have, and that's the thing too. Like, even though it was at flyweight, if you look at the guys who are underneath as far as the contenders, you kind of have to hold that loss to Cejudo against Dillashaw when you're talking about who really gets a title shot.
that's the thing, yeah.
Because Dillashaw's up to his fight before his comeback against Corey Sandhagen, he was coming off a loss to Cejudo. So how could you give him a shot over Cejudo if he wants it? You
Even
know
though
what
it's
I mean?
a different division. Yeah, it's this weird thing.
I wonder, though, what comes into play as far as the testing pool. Does he have to take that 3 months because he's re-entering? Because if he does have to take that 3 months, that gives you an opportunity to do the Dillashaw fight, and then Henry just has a delayed return based off, the whole testing.
I think he can still hold a camp during that, can't he? Or does he?
No, he can, but I
Yeah.
just mean, don't they?
I think as long as the fight is 3 months out, then he would have enough time to meet his testing pool requirements, have your typical camp and time off, for Aljo,
Yeah, true. I
etc.
guess so.
Because that's the thing that I just keep thinking is I just don't see Cejudo talking about coming back for Volkanovski like he did, then being denied that,
And then just not getting him.
and then what? He's going to take a contender fight at bantamweight, leaving with the belt. I don't see him coming back for that, dude. What the fuck would that be? That's not legacy. Coming back to fight the current champ, though, is, especially when he thinks he can beat him.
Yeah. And in all honesty, I kind of think you can beat him too. Because
it's
like
hard to say
everything,
no to that.
everything that Aljo does good, that's what Henry's good at too.
Mm-hmm.
And I love Aljo, but I think
Mm-hmm.
Henry is ultimately better than him. Like when it comes to the wrestling and everything else, obviously he's a fucking Olympic champ. I mean, you know what I mean? Like that shit just doesn't go away.
Yes, we're gonna have to monitor this bantamweight situation here for a while and see how this unfolds. But this is a real wild card in this whole that affects this Font Vera fight,
Yeah.
and the rest of the division. Because you think Aljo would probably want that fight because he'll see it as well, there's a lot of noise
Money.
there, and he beats Cejudo. He knows that's a big name on his resume.
bread. Yeah. That is bread.
So I got this AK in this bubbler if you want to hit it. Your pick though ultimately is going to be Chito Vera. We're switching back and we'll round out the UFC with this.
Yep.
So and I'm picking Rob Font here to actually make a statement with this victory. So we'll see how that plays out. And that's going to round out our UFC for this episode. And it brings us into really the fight of the weekend. It influences the UFC, and we're going to talk boxing. We're going to talk Tyson Fury, Dillian White. We're going to talk everything that means, which circles into Francis Ngannou and this boxing crossover like we were talking about with Cyborg.
Yep.
And so let's first talk about Tyson Fury's victory over Dillian Whyte. What are your immediate thoughts when you saw the KO in the 6th round?
Just another, masterclass by Tyson Fury. That's just what it was. I mean, it was a matter of time, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it was 76-29, and on like jabs, the total punches on the body landed 76-29, jabs 29-8, power punches 47-21, all in Fury's favor.
Yeah.
It was utter domination, and the first uppercut that he lands on the inside, and it's over.
Yep.
And Dillian Whyte is not a chump. I mean, a lot of people outside of boxing, the names might not be familiar. He's a big star in the UK. He is. I mean, I was throwing some shade on him. He's a solid heavyweight.
Of course, he's a big star. They fucking sold that stadium out 93,000 people, dude. 94,000 people. That's so many fucking people.
From what I understand, it was original, and I might be slightly off in these numbers, but just to let people know the significance, it started at 80,000 seats available, and they sold out in 3 hours. So they slowly started adding more, and they were selling out in minutes until they squeezed the capacity in at 94,000.
Yeah. That's fucking nuts.
And I think that the total time to sell all 94,000 was under 4 hours.
That's fucking
That was
ridiculous.
An amazing atmosphere. Just seeing it on TV, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was shocking.
It was nuts. I mean, of course, you had the pageantry of both guys with the walkouts and shit. It's like, those are like the longest walkouts of all time.
Yeah, not only with the music and the pageantry of it, but the distance.
Yeah,
being in being in a place that big, they had to walk extra far to get.
Because naturally that's the field's like right out of the tunnel. But
yeah, that's like way bigger than
ring
coming
is
out
in
of
the middle of the field. You know what I mean? Like shit.
Exactly. So it was just a lot of pomp and circumstance. Which God, I missed that in the UFC.
Yeah.
I mean, how about before they even brought the fighters out, and you had the whole stadium singing "Sweet Caroline"?
Yeah.
I mean, 94,000 people singing that. Can you imagine being there and that energy of that many people singing that song and everything? I mean, you've been to pro sports. I mean, the first time I ever went to a football game at Mile High Stadium with the Broncos, that was the first thing I was like, holy fuck. Like, you can just feel it. Like, you can feel the energy when you're in this little contained area like that. That would have just been amazing to be at that event. And then to see.
Must have been nuts.
Yeah. To see just utter domination by the best heavyweight boxer in the game right now and of this generation. It's one thing to talk about the greatest of all time and blah, blah, blah. And I think that's conversation for when it's all said and done. But I don't think anybody can doubt he's the best heavyweight of this generation.
Well, here's the problem, Jarrod.
Period.
It is done.
Yes. That's what happens after this. Utter dominance is Fury claims that he's most likely, he did leave a little bit, most likely retired, not from fighting, but from boxing specifically, and he's moving on to entertainment. And this is why I believe that is true. And specifically on entertainment, there's been talk of this Fury versus now UFC heavyweight champ Francis Ngannou in a crossover bout. And who was there?
Francis Ngannou, front row, and they jumped on the microphone together for ESPN and said the fight is going to happen, broke down the rule set, all that jazz, and they're like, yeah, we're going to do this shit.
And then they also discussed it, Fury and Ngannou, Ngannou showed up at the press conference afterwards as well. They had more words, and I believe, in my opinion, that this happens 100%. Okay.
Well, you know what, too?
I'm at 99% that this
You know what's crazy is, like, Ngannou had the opportunity to, like, sneak behind enemy lines there, too, because it, like, had he done that, like a Bellator event or something like that would be one thing. But the reason he was able to get around it with this situation was he was there as a representative of ESPN, which also broadcasts the UFC. So he went behind the UFC's back, really, used their outlet to promote his next fight that will not necessarily be a part of the UFC as well.
I don't think it will. I don't think the UFC would ever allow this to happen.
Yeah.
I think that Ngannou, and he came flat out and said it. He said during all of this that he has a 1-year championship clause for either he has to have one more fight or a 1-year period, and the year period will be over at the end of 2022, where we're at right now. And I don't think that he's coming out and saying things that aren't true. I think that the UFC has already signaled that this is what's going to happen, because suddenly Dana is talking about John Jones versus Stipe for the interim title, just like we've been fucking talking about on the show, being their first step to ultimately having John Jones, who I think would win that fight as much as everybody knows I love Stipe here. It's just you elevate John Jones to the championship at the exact same time that fucking Francis leaves, and it shuts down all that noise, and it puts all the shine back on Jones.
I don't know if it shuts
UFC
down all the
comes
noise,
out.
but
Well, in the UFC's hopes, it shuts out. You know, now they'll all be back on John Jones's nuts. You'll see a press conference with him and Dana. They'll be buddy because Dana will be trying to shut down the magnitude of Ngannou leaving. But he's done. They're getting this fight.
Do you see any kind of scenario where, if the money is all written out and everything is all written out, in a situation where Francis also brought it to the UFC, that they could find common ground at this point?
No, because, and the reason I don't is because I think that Dana White felt that Conor McGregor had a somewhat decent chance against Floyd Mayweather, and probably not much of a chance to embarrass his brand in a loss. Whereas I believe he feels that Ngannou will get embarrassed by Fury, which would make the UFC look bad. They don't want their champion to come back with his tail tucked between his legs after getting embarrassed by Tyson Fury, who will go on to declare himself the baddest motherfucker there ever was.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't be wrong. And the UFC will be left there like, now we got to promote this guy as the baddest man on the planet after everybody's seen this.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing that I think just, nope, they're going to be like, nope, go do your thing.
Well, with that being said, just trying to play the other side of it, is although all those things are true, on the other side, you have to look at how that fight breaks down as well. Like, when you look at the Conor McGregor Floyd Mayweather thing, it was two big names that were it wasn't necessarily as much about like the actual idea that Conor could beat Floyd. Like, there was never really like a situation where everyone was ever thinking like, oh, Conor's really going to go in there.
It was the dollar bills behind Conor's big brand, right?
The brands coming together, and also the novelty of like, what really could he do in there against someone like Floyd? Would he be able to land the big shot? Would all that kind of stuff. With Ngannou and Fury, I feel like the two names are huge and big, and like all the stories are great and everything. But there's a lot bigger situation. Like, when we're talking about heavyweight boxing, and especially if we're talking about boxing in 4-ounce gloves, there's so much that can happen in that ring that nobody can prepare for. You know what I mean? Like, that the idea that Conor had a better chance of putting on for better and possibly winning that fight versus Francis' chance of just maybe landing that perfect punch with 4-ounce gloves on anybody on planet Earth is, I think, higher than any chance Conor ever had of beating Floyd Mayweather. Like, if we're really looking at it, like, objectively,
I guess I can agree with that.
You know what I mean?
Like, first I was thinking no,
just
but
heavyweight boxing and power
percentage-wise,
percentage-wise, there's just a better chance that Francis could possibly land some kind of crazy shot that maybe is like some glancing blow that just hits him in the perfect place. And because they're so big, that's the thing. Is like, now we're running it. It's different. That's why I feel like people keep comparing this fight to like the same thing as like Wilder Fury. Like, why would we want to see that? We already saw like Wilder and Fury. The difference between this and that one is like, Wilder was a big guy, but Francis is also going to come in around the same weight.
Yeah, Francis ain't no 210, 218.
He's going to come in the same weight as Tyson. So like, can Tyson Fury take those big power shots and also someone who's just as big as him and just as strong as him? Like, that's no matter
just
what,
as strong and heavy, maybe not as big. Francis ain't that. I mean, he's
not
still
that
going to have a
tall,
reach and
he's
size
still gonna have,
advantage.
But I just
sure.
mean, like, in the same idea as like a lot of the guys that Tyson has fought have been like on the same height wise, but no one's really ever met him like body style. Like, you know what I mean? And
He won't be able to push Francis around like he could some of these other
exactly.
guys.
That's basically what
Yeah.
I'm trying to say.
But and I agree with everything you just said, and I'm also going to say that Francis doesn't win that fight.
I don't think so either, but you know what I'm saying. The percentage wise, just like in the idea of I'm Dana White, I'm getting behind Francis in this because it's a win-win scenario for me, just in the same way the Conor and Floyd fight's a win-win scenario for me. I don't think Francis losing to Tyson Fury really hurts his career that much. Like, yeah, the whole like I get the thing you're saying about baddest man in the planet and all that jazz, but at the same time we're talking about a guy who is an all-time great. To say that you stepped in the ring with an all-time great, and let's say he gives Fury some work, just like Conor gave Floyd some work, like I feel like that does something for Francis as a combat sports athlete, that he can transcend from, like, you know what I'm saying? How we always talk about like striking in the UFC doesn't mean you're a
Yeah.
good boxer. If Francis were to go in there and display good boxing skills on top of everything he can do in the octagon as well, like I feel like that makes him into more of a myth than he already is, because that means this guy not only can he dominate in the mixed martial arts realm, but he also could hang with one of the greatest boxers who's ever lived. You know what I mean? Like,
I see what you're saying.
yeah,
I just disagree that that could happen. I like Francis, and I'm not
Yeah.
trying to throw shade on him at all
no, I
here.
get it.
And I think that if he was fighting even someone like Anthony Joshua, I would agree like everything you're saying.
Yeah,
But he's fighting a guy who his last 12 opponents, Tyson Fury's last 12 opponents, who are professional boxers, have landed a total of 24% of their punches against him. And in his last fight here, in the first round, Dylan White, a top-level boxer who would give Ngannou all he could handle.
yeah, for
okay?
sure.
In the first round, he landed 5 punches. The second round, 5. The third, 4. The fourth, 6. The fifth, 7 punches. And in the sixth, he landed 2. Fury is nearly untouchable by guys who are striking specialists.
Mhm.
Francis is going to come in throwing wild, and Tyson's not going to get hit. I mean, he might get hit here and there, but I don't see him getting
But
touched.
this is-
He'll embarrass him with his movement
I agree
and
with.
his footwork. And he's a precision puncher in gloves. He's going to snake right into them long-ass arms and pop Ngannou the fuck up, man.
I agree, but that's where I do think the novelty of the UFC gloves and the 4-ounce gloves comes into it.
It's so
Because
interesting.
It's very interesting because I do
I
agree
agree
with
with
you.
that,
Like,
yeah.
you know, like Fury is virtually unhittable, but a lot of the thing is too, like, he knows how to use his gloves.
See, that's where I thought Conor would have an advantage, because you've got Floyd in that fight, right? He uses
Yeah.
the fucking shell defense a lot with his gloves, and I was
Yeah.
like, okay, you know, Conor might be able to get around that a little bit.
Yeah.
But if Tyson was that type of fighter, if he used a shell, I'd be like, well, he ain't gonna be able to do that in a 4-ounce glove, son.
Yeah, he's got
But
good head
he
movement,
doesn't.
so,
He
yeah.
fucking moved. Like, did you see some of those highlights? He's moving from punches like Jesus, bro.
But just to compare,
I mean,
when he did fight Wilder, when Wilder did hit him, he was using his gloves a lot to catch a lot of punches.
yeah, he does. Yeah, I don't mean he never does, but
Yeah.
he slips a lot
Yeah, he
more
does
than
slip a lot. Yeah.
than he shells up
Mhm.
or parries. So
Yeah.
it's a really interesting thing. And finally, I think another factor that we haven't discussed yet, and it's super unique to Tyson Fury, is who he is ethnically and what they do. He
Right.
is a gypsy.
Yeah.
He's a traveler, and he comes from not only a family of bare knuckle fighting is huge in gypsy culture.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, he grew up bare knuckle brawling. His
Oh, yeah.
dad was king of the gypsies in that culture. You know how you get that title? Because you're the baddest motherfucker of the gypsies.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, that's why he wound up going to prison, because he was
Bad
he
motherfucker.
ended a feud because he's a
Yeah.
bad motherfucker, and he fucked
Yeah.
the motherfucker's eyeball out.
Yeah.
And Tyson Fury is not just the Gypsy King in his boxing moniker either. Like, so culturally, he's definitely had a lot of experience, I promise, that we aren't privy to,
Yeah.
fighting bare knuckle, which is very similar to the 4-ounce gloves. Now that may not negate everything, but I'm just saying that's got to have some mixture with him
true.
where other boxers would not have that.
That's what I like about this fight more than anything is I think the two stories that you can use, like if this fight is promoted correctly, all I'm doing is diving into the history of Francis Ngannou and the history of Tyson Fury because
because we're all talking what ifs right now.
Yeah, we're all well. Not even that. It's just the actual like story in which like we're talking about Tyson Fury coming back and like all the things he's overcome and to get where he's at. And then on the other side, you have this guy Francis Ngannou who used to freaking shovel sand and fucking swam to Europe. Like took him 26 times before he got there. But when he got there, he always wanted to be a boxer and like all the whole story and build up and the actual promotion of this fight is so fucking easily just like easy pickings as far as like the money that can be made here. That's why I'm just so dumbfounded on why Dana White doesn't want anything to do with it. You know what I mean? Like
he's a stubborn son of a bitch with things. We'll see. We'll see how it plays out. But we're both thinking this fight happens.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking it happens with the UFC is done with Francis. But we'll see. We don't know.
It also would come down to like if they try to like I know you were saying that the language of the contract is pretty exact.
So we've been told. I mean, we all haven't seen it.
But that's my thing. If it's not, and there's some kind of situation where he gets just locked up 3 ways from Sunday with fucking lawsuits, that's going to be the only thing that stops this fight. And what people don't realize too, Tyson Fury just finished his TV contract last night as well.
Sure did. Yeah.
So that also has some like whoever wins this bid, it's going to be like an astronomical number. Like it's going to be huge.
Absolutely. It's a stadium show.
Oh,
whatever they
without a doubt. Well, they said they want to do it at Raiders Stadium, which is really not that big when you're talking about grand stadiums in the world, but the modernization and it being in a stadium in America, that'll be huge.
Fight capital of the world.
Fight capital of the world. Yeah,
right down the street from
It'll
us.
be huge.
Yeah. And rounding out here the Fury talk, let's circle back to the boxing aspect of it. His retirement. I mean, he hasn't vacated his titles yet.
Yeah, I believe when I see it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I mean, that's the thing here. When he vacates, then we're like, okay. But it's hard to imagine, especially if AJ wins his titles back from Usyk.
Because that would spark a third fight.
I don't know.
And then the best case scenario is Usyk beats Joshua again, and then we get Usyk versus Tyson Fury.
I just love to see those titles. Everything united. It would unite everything.
Well,
the aforementioned lineals that I love so much, which is way more important in boxing if people listen and are just UFC fans. Boxing is a whole different thing with the lineal champions.
Well, you know what the thing is, too? I hope that the WBC doesn't see the writing on the wall and just doesn't strip him, because that's what in the past has happened, and that's what, like, undisputed titles are great, but honestly, like, for what it's worth, a lot of these major, like the WBC, IBF, all the different belt organizations, they are pretty quick to just strip somebody, even if there is some kind of undisputed status on the horizon. Because if you look at Tyson Fury the first time when he was undisputed champion, he was stripped in like fucking 30 days.
Right.
Of all of them. You know what I mean? And so now when he's talking retirement,
he's on a pretty clear downward spiral, though. To be clear,
yeah, that's true. That's true. Obviously, it's a different scenario, but I just mean in the fact of like the whole retirement thing is, do the WBC see Tyson Fury as now somebody that isn't going to make that money for them in the future? So they'll strip him of the belt and make whatever fight with Wilder or Andy Ruiz or whoever they deem their number one contender.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about a couple more boxing bouts, but before we finish that out, let's do 3 questions, yes or no only. You're up first. Fury retirement,
No.
real or no?
No.
I say yes. Francis versus Fury, does it happen? Yes or no?
Yes.
I say yes. Francis be in the UFC at this time next year? No.
But I'll preface that last question with, he will be after the fight.
All right. Let's talk about a couple other boxing, major boxing bouts this weekend before we round out this episode. How about the Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano lightweight undisputed unification of 4 titles? And, you know, I got to give
Madison Square
MVP
Garden.
Productions some credit here.
Yep.
They did get this done. I don't know how it's going to sell. Doesn't really matter to me. I don't care if he makes money. I do care that these belts are being united and that this is a good fight.
Yeah, and both these ladies get paid.
And they seem to be getting paid. I don't know what they said.
Anytime you main event Madison Square Garden, you better be getting paid, my dog.
And this is coming from a guy who, again, I talk a lot of shit about Jake Paul, but he does seem to be an advocate for higher pay for fighters in general.
Yeah.
And I do support that 100%.
And he seems to be handling Amanda Serrano correctly as far as her, like, because I believe he's their manager at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, he seems to be doing the right things for her. I mean, that she's had, 3 pretty solid, big fights that have been on some of these trailer cards and some of this that stuff. But the thing is, each one of those times she's been on those, she's been, more of the star than anything you see in the night. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, that's where you're seeing some of the best fighting coming from. And now you get them in this, this big stage as far as like being on Madison Square Garden. That's a fucking one of the most historic arenas in America. Like, and I believe this is Katie Taylor's American debut as well, right?
As far as I understand it, it is. Yes.
Yeah, so that's just a huge crossover as well,
And this is the elite of the elite.
Oh, yeah. This is going to be a hell of a fight.
And it's going to be an amazing fight. I'm not sure what to think on who wins. They're both extraordinary.
I think Serrano wins.
I'm leaning towards Katie Taylor.
I like Katie Taylor, but I didn't like her last fight.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm taking Serrano.
It's definitely something that we're going to be watching, and I'm more interested in talking about it afterwards. Everybody's going to be breaking it down, but I think we're going to see a really excellent performance from both of these ladies that'll leave us with something to really talk about next week.
Yeah.
So there's finally one other major title unification bout this weekend as well. We've got super featherweights unifying, right? We've got WBC champ Oscar Valdez fighting WBO champ Shakur Stevenson.
This is a huge fight.
This is a great fight.
Really, really good fight. 2 just like top of the food chain fighters. Man, I don't even know who to take in this one. I like Shakur Stevenson a lot, to be honest. I think he's the future. But Valdez is, I think, a really big, like, obviously Stevenson is a champion, but I think this is a pretty big test for Shakur Stevenson. We're really going to see, like, where he's at. Like, because I think he is, these 2 are, like, the 2 best in the division, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I think it could really go either way. Like,
I agree 100%. These guys are excellent, and we're going to just. That's the beautiful thing about boxing. They've managed to get a lot of these important fights together, and you've got these 2 guys that are just at their peak right here. They're both super talented. I have no idea who wins this fight, but whoever it does is going to make a statement here, especially if it's a convincing win. I mean, hopefully, all I ask for out of both of these big title fights this weekend is please let there be a clear victor without controversy.
Yeah, true.
And then whoever that is will have really earned something here, because whoever comes out victorious has really made a statement both for their career, for their legacies, and for their division.
Mm-hmm.
And it anytime belts get unified in boxing, it's so important to me as a fan, and you can't ask for much better stuff going on. We've got a series of weekends here with boxing in the future as well. This past weekend was great. Yeah.
Who are you taking ultimately in this fight?
I'm going to go with Stevenson. I think
Stevenson wins
time.
too. I think Stevenson by unanimous decision.
Yeah, me too. Decision. Yeah. And let's round out the show with this, because it's popping up again here, unbelievably. Because you mentioned Canelo, and we think he'll likely be victorious. I don't think that's making too much of a bet in this fight here, but we won't touch on that. It's the Kamaru Usman thing is getting talked about again this week. We're recording the show versus Canelo Alvarez again, and Alvarez is even commenting, I'm not interested in that. But
Yeah.
he is commenting on it instead of just brushing
Mhm.
it off. Do you think that this is something is going to gain any traction?
If they fucking did that shit and like what they did to Francis, it'd just be such a backhand. Like, you know what I mean? It'd be such a fucking backhand.
Wouldn't it though?
It would be because like let's just look at it this way. Like you think fucking Francis has no chance against fucking Tyson Fury? You want to talk about someone who's no fucking chance in hell?
None.
It's fucking Kamaru Usman versus Canelo Alvarez. Like, are you
That would
fucking
be
kidding
an
me?
absolute embarrassment. And no shade towards Kamaru Usman, but dude,
It's just
you're talking
levels to
about
this shit.
Canelo
I mean, like,
Alvarez, the best boxers on the planet can't fuck with this guy. You're not coming over here with your UFC striking and your little bit of fucking pad work and shit you do in the gym and compare yourself. It's
at
just
least
not.
Francis is like a hybrid fight.
Right,
Like
right.
fuck.
This would just be a pure boxing, and they just keep going with this chatter. It's just surprising to me. That's one I don't want to see. I do want to see Francis get to pay. Like, I don't think he can win, but I want to see that. I want to see the big payday. I think if anybody in their life has earned the right for some kind of massive payday of millions and millions of dollars, it's Francis fucking Ngannou.
Yeah.
And I don't think the loss to Fury will hurt his brand overall. I think he could even go box lower level guys, or he could go to bare knuckle, or he could go to WWE.
Or I think
Or he could
honestly,
go to
if he,
PFL.
yeah, I think there's a scenario too where he leaves, has this fight, and he's just undeniable when it comes to the UFC. Like he could literally come out of this, just at the end of the day, doing what he's been doing since the beginning of all of this is betting on himself. You know what I mean? Like he's the moves he's
That's what I
making
like to
right
see,
now
yeah.
is betting on himself no matter what. You know, like
Yeah,
that's
absolutely,
what
Paul.
Francis
That's what
is
I
doing.
like to see. And Canelo fighting Usman, that's not Usman betting on himself. That's everybody setting themselves up for a fight nobody wants to see outside
That's everyone
of,
trying to get paid.
yeah, you know, Ali Abdulaziz, whatever, manager Ali wants to see that fight because he'll get paid. Usman wants it because he's a fighter and he rightly thinks he can beat anybody that's
What's
remotely
up with
his
this?
size.
Why does everyone in MMA right now want to box? Because did you see that also? Like Dan Hardy and Diego Sanchez are boxing each other.
I did. I saw that actually yesterday.
It's strange. I
I
don't
was-
understand what's going on as far as that. Like, what? Like, I get it if like you're a champion of the world and you want to test yourself like a Fury or like even even Kamaru Usman to a certain extent.
Well, I
like,
understand Kamaru's
yeah,
thinking.
like he's thinking, I want to be the baddest man on the planet.
Yeah.
I want to prove.
I'll throw
Like, why
shade
the
on that.
fuck
Yeah.
is Dan Hardy and fucking? Why are they boxing each other? Like, why don't you guys just fight in an MMA fight? I'm confused.
Yeah, who wants to watch a couple people who aren't even club level boxers
Box.
box? Like, why don't you and I go play some golf? Anybody want to watch that? Let's put it on pay per view. You can watch me and Paul, who are not professional
match.
golfers or anything resembling it. Go play golf. Fuck it.
Y'all
I mean,
wanna-
you used to wrestle. I used to box. Let's do it. Yeah, because
go-
nobody wants to watch
go
that
through an
low level
NFL
fucking
combine.
shit.
Yeah.
I don't get it, dude.
It doesn't make any sense to me. I do not understand why it's happening.
Who's putting that on? That's not pay per view, is it? Who would pay to watch that?
I don't know. Is Diego still under contract with that Eagle FC? What if it's an Eagle FC?
I figured it was a one-off deal he signed with them if he had any common sense left. And I don't mean that to get anything on Eagle FC, but I mean you shouldn't be signing big deals with fledgling promotions.
That's
Well, Canelo, Usman, no thanks. I think we'll end the show with that.
Yep.
Thanks for tuning
That
in,
wraps it
everybody. If you're brand new, you can catch us everywhere. Podcasts are out, video on YouTube, a few radio stations in the mix, social media, Twitter, Instagram. It's all in one spot.
SWATmid.com, where you can head over there, click the like button, and support the podcast, and buy a t-shirt, motherfuckers. And
Peace.
follow us on Instagram, SWAT and May Podcast. Peace.